Hello again, Dave Specter here with Blues and Beyond, working on our engineer and producer series. And we're here in Evanston, Illinois, just outside of Chicago at Reeves Recording Studio, Reeves Audio Recording. And the man behind the board is none other than Jim Reeves.
Good evening.
How you doing, Jim?
Good evening and welcome to Reeves Audio Recording.
What is this that we're listening to in the background? Some of your old...
This was Linda and the Vistas, recorded at about 1962 at Pt1 Sound Studios, the original Atlantic Recording Studios, Herb Abramson's place. The predecessor to Jerry Wexler. And
Was this before they built the church?
Oh, the church was for Columbia Records.
That was a Columbia.
But that was around probably. Oh yeah, that definitely was around because I was actually there. My mentor, Dave Sarser, brought me there for a recording of a 30-piece orchestra and a 30-piece choir, and Paul Robeson singing patriotic cantatas to the American, the United States of America kind of thing.
Whoa.
So that was pretty fantastic. But anyway, this was this group that came in with for Joe Bett Records, Barry Gordy's East Coast company with Eddie Singleton on Shrine Records. A lot of 3-track. These are all 3-track sessions.
3-track.
On an old Presto 3-track machine that Herb got out of a basket at an auction.
Yeah.
Put it together along with a Neumann cutting lathe for $50 or something.
So Jim, you grew up in New York, you grew up in Manhattan. When did you get into the recording business?
Well, really, I started when I was about 13. I got a Wallen sack. I worked delivering newspapers, and I saved money up. And for $100, I bought a Wallen sack tape recorder. And the goal was to get a second one so that I could overdub all the vocal parts because I was in a singing group, and it was getting hard to teach them the arrangements of the vocals, so it was easier for me if I could just overdub all the parts myself and then present it to them.
This was a doo-wop group?
Doo-wop
back in the 50s?
In the 50s, yeah. First prize, 40 group competition. We won studio time. And some gangsters killed the guy who owned the studio, so we never got the studio time.
That's rough.
An hour. We would have had a whole hour's worth of recording time.
So you went on to work at labels like Columbia, at studios like The Record Plant, recording and engineering people like Johnny Winter, ZZ Top, Lou Reed, George Harrison.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on. B.B. King. Going on the road with Booker T and the MGs, it's quite a career, quite a roster of talent.
Yeah, it's all unfolded, one day after the next. I was recording, Skitch Henderson was the Tonight Show orchestra leader, and he owned a little studio a couple of buildings away from my uncle's drugstore on the corner of 57th Street and Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. In the Peter Stuyvesant Carriage House. And Leo from the Delicatessen said, I didn't know you were interested in recording. Let me introduce you to Skitch's partner at the studio. So he brought me over to the studio, and Dave Sarser was the Stradivarius violinist in Toscanini's Symphony Orchestra for NBC. And they needed somebody to mop the floors and clean the toilets,
Yeah.
So I said, cool, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That gave me access to the studio. I had keys. Used to bring my group in, and I had my singing group, and not necessarily the actual group, but friends who sang together, and we'd go in and experiment. And I loved that studio. It was a very intimate studio, all custom made by Dave, who was not only a virtuoso violinist, but a consultant to Altec company designing amplifiers, and friends with Pultec, and people who are in the recording business will know what a Pultec is. The console was even painted Pultec blue by them, which made it really unique. And I used to just mop the floors and bring my group in when nobody was looking. And then I went over to a place called, where was it? I guess I went to A1 Sound next. I went around to different studios looking for a job, and I left a note under the elevator door because it was locked. They were closed for vacation, and he called me up and said, "Are you interested in engineering?" So I started running the studio in the daytime.
Really?
Yeah. He was always late.
This was Dave Sarcer?
No, this was Herb Abrams.
Oh, Herb Abrams.
Founder of Atlantic Records.
Wow.
He and Amador.
Yeah.
So, in the meantime, I was still mopping floors at Studio 3, and I worked at A1 for a little over a year, I guess. And Skitch Henderson called me up, and he said, "Well, why aren't you engineering here? Why are you engineering there?" And I said, "Well, you only need me as a porter over there." And I still was. So he invited me to, Dave didn't want to work full time anymore, so I became the chief engineer there. And I gladly went back. I did people like Sarah Vaughan and Victor Moan and Florence Henderson and Leslie Gore.
Wow.
And lots of jingles. And then he wanted to close the studio at some point and write it off for taxes. And Skitch got in a little bit of trouble for taxes at some point. But I said, "Well, why don't I buy the studio from you? I don't want to see you close the studio. We can work out a deal." So I started paying him off every month for the studio. And I started producing groups at the studio. And I got involved with the wrong people, and some bent-nosed type people, and they ended up forcing me to sign the studio away to them. So I lost that place, but I did, in the meantime, have a group signed. I had a couple of groups signed to United Artists and to Epic Records. So I would go over to Columbia Records to produce the Epic group, and I needed some money, and my engineer said, "Well, why don't you get a job here?" So I interviewed for the job, and they were pretty excited about having me. And they paid me top union scale, which was close to $1,000 a week back then, which was crazy. So I started engineering there for 3 years, and started all over again because I kind of lost everything in Studio 3.
Right. So what year was this when you started at Columbia?
69.
Okay.
And I guess one of the first albums I did was, a group called the Arbors from here. As a matter of fact, they live about 6 blocks away from here now.
Really?
And I did an album with them in 1969 at A&R Studios, which was a subsidiary of Columbia. They kind of leased the place. They didn't have enough studios of their own to keep up, so they leased A&R, and that's when I started working with A&R.